Hi, Sue. How great to see your new horse, although I wish you were in this country, not on the dark continent. But anyhow, it is great to see you. You say that your major concerns are how close Bonamy is behind as far as brushing his hind feet together, hind legs together, and also that he's not very forward in the arena. It takes you a while to get him to stop protesting going forward, but he's great when he goes out on groups, to the beach, on trails, and you're looking for some of that energy and motivation when he's working in the arena. But before I get into any of that stuff, I want to talk about your position, because this is something you can work on whether you're in the arena or out on the trails or out on the beach. Generally, no matter which way you're circling, you have your right side forward. So we need to think about, especially if you're tracking to the right, you need to think about bringing your right shoulder back so your shoulders are parallel to his shoulders and your hips are parallel to his hips. When you're going to the left, it's not as obvious, but it's flip side of the same coin. So you can think right shoulder back or left shoulder a little forward, whichever makes sense to you. But we need you to be in harmony with the position of his shoulders to help him bend more. Now, the other thing that happens is that you lean to the inside. You do it in circles in both directions. The right shoulder is forward in both directions, but you're also leaning to the inside of the circle in both directions. And what that does is it brings your inner seat bone too close to the midline of the saddle, and your outside seat bone is too far away, so you're not sitting in the middle of the horse. So I want you to practice. You can even do it in the walk, just going down the long side, turning onto a 10-meter circle, continuing down the long side, going on a 10-meter circle, rather than sitting in a normal position with your weight on the inside seat bone and the weight down into the iron. I want you to think as you go onto a curved line, like a 8 or 10-meter circle or a corner, that you step down into the into the outside iron, and you shift your hips to the inside. And then working up your upper body, take your outside shoulder and feel like it's being drawn to the fence line. So the weight on your outside stirrup, your upper body sort of leaning to the right, but your hips shifting to the inside. That way we get you in the middle of the horse. Now, if it makes more sense to think of it this way, let's say you're circling to the left, you put your weight down in the right iron, you do a hip shift and bring your right seat bone closer to the midline of the saddle, and your right shoulder goes out toward the fence line. So we want to fix that outside of your body. We want to bring that seat closer to the midline of the saddle so that you end up with your seat bones equidistant from the middle of the saddle. Right now your inside seat bone is too close to the middle of the saddle, outside seat bone is too far away, making it hard for him to balance himself. When you shift your hips to the inside, thinking I'm going to place my outer seat bone on that imaginary midline that runs from the pommel to the cantle, you won't actually be doing that, but you'll end up in the middle of the horse. Here's another way to think of it. As you're circling now and you're leaning to the inside, you have 3/4 of your body weight on the inside of the horse, 1/4 of your body weight on the outside of the horse. As you go onto a circle or curve, think I'm going to have 3/4 of my body weight on the outside of the horse and only 1/4 of my body weight on the inside of the horse. So two things with your position. We need to get you centered, sitting upright with your seat bones equidistant from the saddle, and we need to bring either the right shoulder back or the left shoulder forward. Fix your seat first, then fix your torso. Once you fix that, imagine you have a clear plastic plexiglass tube that someone could drop right down over your head, past your shoulders to your hips, and because you're so straight and upright, no part of your body would touch the inside edge of the plexiglass. You would just rest softly within the perimeter of that plexiglass. If you're tracking to the left and you're leaning to the left, your left shoulder and your right hip would touch the edges of the plexiglass. So we need to get you straight and centered. So that's your main position homework, but I do want to mention, I want you to relax your lower leg. You're gripping with your lower legs. Relax behind your knees, let your legs hang long. Feel like your entire leg from the hip down to your ankle is just draping around his barrel like a wet towel. The more you grip with your legs, the less your hips are going to be moving, and that's going to be contributing to him not wanting to go as forward in the ring as he does when he's out on a trail ride or with friends or at the beach, because the gripping of your leg is going to stop your hips from following, and it's like stepping on the gas and having the emergency brake on at the same time. Your hips have to move, they have to swing to match, so that they're sort of like in a passive driving mode. You're not actively pushing with your seat every stride, but you're going along. And those tight legs and tight behind your knee and tight calves are going to make it difficult for your hips to be loose. Also, if you're gripping really tight with your legs, when you go to give a leg aid, he's not going to feel it because he's going to be numbed out to the pressure of your legs on his sides. Now, getting back to this idea of stepping on the accelerator and having the emergency brake on at the same time, I want to talk about your following in the walk and in the canter. I want you to think about what you're doing when you're out with your friends. You're probably on a loose rein or on a long rein, and so he doesn't feel restricted at all. You want to mimic that feeling when you're in the arena. So in the walk, your elbows aren't following forward and back enough so that you allow for the movement of his neck to telescope forward and back, and he feels no restriction in front at all. If he feels restriction, he's going to shorten his strides and not want to go forward. Now, in the canter, you are following with your elbows, but you're a little bit following in the wrong direction. You're opening and closing your elbows, but your elbows on the backswing are coming behind your body. So I want you to think of that home position for your elbows is not quite at your waist, but if you made a right angle with your elbows and they were at your waist, bring them maybe an inch or so forward so your hands are over the withers, they're over what I call the work area. And as you open your elbows and imagine you're pushing your horse's nose forward, on the backswing, stop your elbows when they're 1 inch in front of your waist. Don't let them come exactly to the side of your waist, and definitely don't let them come behind your waist. So on the third beat of the canter, when the leading leg is on the ground, you're pushing the nose out, out, out. Now, as far as the canter itself is concerned, he's rushing a little bit. He needs to be slower so he can be more balanced. You might try several transitions of 5 or 6 strides canter, 5 or 6 strides walk, 5 or 6 strides canter, 5 or 6 strides walk, so that he'll be the most slow on that strike-off stride, so that you learn to recreate the strike-off stride over and over again, so he doesn't get barreling along like a freight train. So slower the canter. Also rounder the canter. Think about the challenges we had with flying changes with Hindrik. You've got to get him longer, deeper, rounder over his top line so that when we start doing changes, they're clean changes. They're not going to be late behind because there's a break in the circuit of energy over his back. So I know you know a lot of the tools that we used for Hindrik, so I want you to do +7+1 suppling to begin with, to show him the spot and help him to relax over his top line, and then eventually your connecting aids. But for now, when you go to canter, just to make it easier for yourself and to show him the spot of having his head and neck lower and his withers up, as opposed to his head and neck up and the withers down and the back down and running off his hind legs, which also contributes to him breaking to the trot because he loses his balance. His hind legs are too far behind him. So you're in the trot or in the walk, do 3 +7 +1 supples. As you feel him lengthening and lowering and stretching his neck, Cue the aid for the canter, and immediately +7 +1 +7 +1 +1 +7 +1 to remind him to stay with his neck down and his withers up. So he canters more as a unit, and his hind legs are more underneath him so that he can be slower and more balanced. Now, the last thing you mentioned was how close he is behind. I know that's concerning to you. As he gets stronger, as he starts to work with his hind legs more underneath himself, carrying himself rather than pushing his weight along, which you will accomplish with your suppling and your connecting aids, then he will begin to bend the joints of the hind legs more, and the flight of his foot will be more straight forward under the body as opposed to crossing. In the meantime, I agree you should absolutely have boots on him. I would not ride him without boots because you don't want him hitting himself and then having him associate work with anything that's painful. I'd also talk to your farrier, make sure that he's trimmed correctly or shod correctly, so it makes it easier for him to track straight.